Item number 2, Lake Boulevard Pioneer Way Construction Award. This is Mike Michael is going to talk to us about this issue.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. We talked about this at length last week, and the Commission still had a few questions, so I'm back again. Key critical point, I guess, that remind the Commission of is that, as we discussed at last week's meeting, we do need to award Schedule B, which is the sewer work, which was the primary discussion point. Really, the decision point for the Commission is whether we proceed with the extra work for the extension or not. As you may recall, there's a portion of work, and actually as we look back at the numbers, it's about 700 feet of existing sewer pipe that's being replaced as part of that schedule. And TIB has agreed to pay for that because we're basically moving it out of the way to make room for additional new improvements that TIB is already paying for as part of the road project. That work totals just shy of, excuse me, just shy of $80,000 based on the bid prices, leaving about $408,000 remaining to be funded by the sewer department as part of this extension. Back in July, we had presented that we were hopeful that we were still within our $250,000 to $350,000 range that we've been talking about, even though our engineer's estimate at that point had gone well above that. We came in better than what the engineer team had thought, but not as well as we were hoping on this. Water, on the other hand, we did really good on. A couple of questions that came out of last week's meeting, as I'm recalling here. What projects are we kind of talking about that we're potentially shifting around, delaying in exchange for this? Going back and reviewing the financial model and the CIP associated with it, we're not talking about a whole lot of projects here. The CIP in the financial model identifies essentially 4 projects. A 5th project came to light as we're working on some budget stuff last week that kind of has been floating around there. Basically, we have 2 capital O&M projects that are ongoing annual projects that are slated to start in 2016 and 2017. One of them is the I&I work that we talked about last week. That starts in 2016 for about $200,000 a year, escalating with inflation based on an inflational increase there. There's a second smaller O&M capital project. It's identified as capital replacements that starts in 2017, again escalating for inflation, starting out at just a little over $40,000 in 2017. The other project we talked about was the Basin 3 Northcliffe project, and Northcliffe in particular, whether Northcliffe is part of Basin 3 or is a separate project. That was really the driver there. That is one. And then the 5th project that we came to light over the weekend, we still have an outstanding need to do some frontage improvements at Front Street Pump Station. And so that project's kind of sitting out there too. The Commission has been wanting to push that off a little bit the last few times it's been brought up, but that is another project that's hanging out there. Financial wise, as you recall, working with Director of Finance last week.
Did you one quick question? You said 5 things, and I wrote down 4.
1, 2, 3. It is 4. I miscounted. Excuse me.
So I'm writing down. I'm listening to what you're saying. So
it is only 4 projects. I guess it's 5 projects if you take Northcliffe and Basin 3 as 2 separate projects.
Right. Okay, I'll split those 2. Okay, thank you.
So, we're looking at cash reserves projected for the end of this year. It appears that we have $250,000 that's usable based on where the budget's at now, where the models are showing us, and what Kathy's projections for how she thinks the fund will do given the first half of the year's activity. In addition, the financial model has hard monies planned in for those O&M projects, totaling, as I said, $200,000 in 2016, and then $240,000+ in 17, escalating with inflation from there. An additional point that I failed to mention last time that Kathy and I talked about, the financial model also has revenue that's generating an O&M reserve between 7.5% and 10% of the projected customer revenue on an annual basis. That right now equates to about $250,000. And Kathy said per need for cash flow varies depending on what we're doing. And right now, because of the lack of capital work, the $250,000 is probably excess from what you need. So the $250 that we included this time includes a portion of that O&M reserve. We've burned out some of that down. But we didn't take that into account in future years, and that leaves, without a lot of big capital work, that leaves about $100,000 additional revenues besides what we've already talked about in these O&M capital projects. Question that was brought up was, what does the $250,000 look like as rate increase percentage? For 2016, it is approximately 8.9% of the projected revenue. We have about $2.81 million in projected revenue from customers in 2016. So this would be about about 8.9% of that, the $250,000. And the one question I thought I heard either at the meeting or afterwards was potential connections to particularly North Cliff compared to Lake Boulevard. And I did a quick look at that. North Cliff, there's approximately 20 lots, plus or minus, that would be directly connectable to that line, serviceable by it. And Lake Boulevard, it appears there's about 42 plus or minus that would be directly connectable without additional major extensions or improvements to the sewer system. About 3,700 feet of pipe total. If we do the entire Schedule B, about 700 feet if we only do the replacement portion that's needed to complete the street. Again, as before, staff recommendation is a little bit higher than we hoped, but it is still a good project, we think, from a technical standpoint. It's really something we should be doing if the commission can see to go in that route. So, with that, I'll answer any questions.
Questions, comments?
The 20 lots that are identified as being potential near customers, are those all in the county?
Yes. I believe so. There may have been a couple that were actually in the city just as you start up the hill. They predominantly were in the county. And the Lake Boulevard would be just the opposite. They're predominantly in the city, but there were a small handful that were county lots there.
So it kind of appears that you can balance it out. You're dancing a fine line, but it looks like that the only damage that would be done would potentially be putting off some O&M. Or maybe not even that, but maybe that much for a year.
Yeah, and that was kind of what Kathy and I were seeing looking at it last week, is exactly that. The I&I projects in particular, and they were really scheduled based on a plan schedule for Basin 3, with Basin 3 not being started yet as far as construction, and delaying those I&I projects a couple of years at this point. It is not unreasonable in our mind.
And the rate increase was already built in from the past, that we're not going to avoid that at all.
Correct.
That's needed for capital. I spoke with a couple of large property owners out there last week that, I just kind of course, they aren't going to commit either way, but it did perk their ears up that we potentially would be putting a sewer line out there, and it would make their property more valuable and the potential. So I am starting to kind of come away from my first stance of not wanting to do it. I think it's starting to look like a better project with the finances that you come back with, that it doesn't look as dire as I first thought it was. So I'm getting a little more warm to it. Guess that's not much of a strict opinion or anything, is it? But it's not emotion or anything, right?
The one point that you're bringing up is scheduled increases. We voted to increase I believe the sewer rates for like 5 years in a row. And when we did that, we weren't in the situation where we are today. We lost 2 mills, and we have 2 years of, we don't really know exactly how our financial picture is going to be during this 2-year period. So I would vote against this at this time because I think that I would not vote in the future for any more water and sewer increases. So I could not, when we talk about guaranteed money or expected rate increases or whatever, I would not vote to increase water and sewer increases. And with that, then that's a little less income. And the other deal is, at some point, the city has to, we can't keep building future infrastructure solely on the backs of the existing ratepayers. That's my statement, and I'll stick by that. At some point, we're going to have to do exactly what we do in our personal lives, and that's we can't drive a brand new car. We sometimes buy used cars because it just costs too much money. I think it's good to build future infrastructure for areas that are growing, but our priority list is Shelton Hills, the new mill downtown, Northcliffe, and I would probably have to say that I could not support $408,000 for the sewer project. So that would be my vote on this situation, and if we do it, it's just one more step in the direction of spending more money totally based upon the backs of the existing ratepayers. And until we actually see buildings going up and income from those buildings, I just can't keep moving in that direction. So.
But this is money that's already there, we're not borrowing.
Absolutely.
So it wouldn't affect the rates at all?
Well,
No?
well, what were we talking about? You were talking about some of this money with the fact that the rates were going to be increased.
This is based on the existing rate structure that's currently in the city code for the sewer.
Yeah. Now, we have 250,000, but you got 408,000. So you're going to need another.
That's, again, this is based on the existing rate structure, which goes out through it's either 2018 or 2019 in the current sewer codes in chapter 15.
If we continue to raise rates on sewer. We voted to do that, so if we continue with that process, it would. Right.
If the
That-
rate...
it's a simple question.
If the rate
Okay,
structure
yeah.
contained in the codes
Yeah.
stays in place,
Right.
then that's the whole financial premise is based on that.
Exactly. Okay, so that's clear. So I'm still where I am on that.
A little bit, to kind of counteract that a little bit, sales tax in the last 2 years has increased 12 to 15% each year. Home sales are up. Unemployment is down. So I don't see that we're in a dire situation in this county. We only lost 250 jobs. Half of them only lived in this county. So it's not a real dire situation that we're in, and I think that in order to really plan for the future, you have to put this infrastructure in. I've already contacted, like I said, a couple of property owners out there that probably wouldn't build if that's not there, but at least we're giving them the option. And I think that's one of the ways to build, get ourselves out of this, is to build out of it, like you keep saying. That without this infrastructure in place, there will be no building out there.
I respect each of us commissioners having our opinions on things. I really don't care what another commissioner's opinion is on something, but if I don't agree with it, that's the right that I have, to speak out exactly what I feel, and that's just the way it is. It's not, we could make the right decision, wrong decision. I would rather have that money directed into Basin 3, or to do the commitments with the capital maintenance, repair things that are coming up, if we have to have that money. I just don't think now is the time to continue to borrow money on the existing people and move forward in that direction. So
Again, we're not borrowing.
sure, we got the money. Where are we going to put it? I would not put it there.
Okay. One of the reasons that we have talked about this from the very beginning is how irresponsible it would be to put in a brand new road and invest millions and millions of dollars into a brand new street without putting the necessary infrastructure in that would enable and encourage development along that street. I know that you've been in favor of that before, so I'm wondering if you've changed your mind about that as well. And then also, I'm a little concerned because I just heard you say that question whether we continued on with our rate increases that we have already established
Right, yeah,
for the next few years.
absolutely. Yeah.
So that's part of your thought process
I'm
as
not
well, is
gonna,
that we might not.
yeah, I'll just be real with you. I will not continue to vote for any more water and sewer rate increases on this city.
And we're not talking about increases. We're talking about the rate schedule that is set right now.
We voted to increase those
Okay.
for 5 years
Mhm.
at a certain percentage. At this point, I would not support doing that. There's nothing unclear about that, that's very clear, because we lost the 2 mills.
Okay,
and
but
our
you're
people,
fine,
yeah.
you're fine with the rate increases that we have established already?
And no, what rate increases? The ones
The
for
ones
the next
that we
5 years?
agreed, the ones that we've agreed to.
Yeah.
for-
No, I would not do those. No, I would stop those. I would stop those immediately.
Okay.
But January 1st is when I think they kick in or something. So I'm just saying, I don't want to keep doing what we've been doing because the people are really, really frustrated with having their rates go up, and I don't want to put them up anymore, so. And I'm not against building future infrastructure if you have the money. We don't have the money, so. That's my position. I mean, we can vote, I don't have any problem voting on this and you voting yes and me voting no. That doesn't bother me at all. It's nothing personal. It's how you look at our future and you look at our past and you look at who's paying the bill. And the people are tired of paying high rates. And I basically agree with them. I think we have to look outside the box at other ways. And it's not solely grants. Grants is one, obviously, thing, but we can take a look at the internal workings of this organization and possibly look at a better way we can do our job here. I mean, we can look at possibly having a partnership with independent identities, private identities, and the government partnering in certain situations. If Mr. Olson had a signed contract with 2 large property owners out there, then that would probably sway me to go that extra distance. But I've said for 4 years, my message hasn't changed. I have tried to do everything I can do to build Basin 3 without borrowing more money, and I will continue to try and do that. That's my opinion, that's what I'm fighting for.
I think that we would probably all be really happy and have all been working to try to get the grant dollars to build Basin 3 with no more money, without borrowing more. I think that, in my opinion, and I was really skeptical about this as well, and I wanted the real numbers for making sure that we had the money within our existing rate structure to pay for this sewer extension going out Lake Boulevard. I think that makes sense to me still. I'm sorry that it costs more money. I am not at all interested in putting more money into the North Cliff extension that benefits the county. I would rather promote growth in the city rather than in the county, and that's part of this discussion too.
Basin 3 has been our priority for 4 years, and we are working together at trying to find other ways to pay for that. That is a true statement. If it's a priority, this particular road and the growth that I see, it's not in our priority. And so I'm just saying no to spending the money, that's all. It's not easy to pay and not put a sewer underneath the line, but you gotta look at who's paying for it, and that's the people. So if we're ready to vote on this, I'd be happy to do that at this time. Is there any more questions for Mike? Michael, thank you you brought back a lot, yeah, okay. You brought back a lot of really good information. I mean, you brought back all the information and laid it out very well. Thank you very much. Okay, public comment. Let's take a look and see. Is there anybody from the public who wants to speak on this specific issue? Yes.
Yeah,
Why don't you come up to the podium,
Oh, sorry.
state your name for the record.
Yeah, Lisa Renfro. I was a little bit thinking, calling the assessor's office saying, well, what does my sewer bill, when I pay my sewer, go for? Because, you know, like I was saying, I don't have a drain in front of my house. And, you know, does my property tax go for that? And she thought that PUD did and the city does, that they give money to the city to do those. So how do you put a request in for that if it's already pre-existing roads and property? Or is there a different way that the city can restructure the ability to have, you know, one budget goes for repairs only and capital facility money goes for infrastructure that's new versus used? Like separate the budget to make sure that they don't cross over or combine, so you don't lose money for the repairs.
Okay, if you could simplify your question.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, do it the best you can,
Yeah,
and then
sorry.
there are people here who could answer that question.
Yeah. When I had called the assessor's office to ask, you know, what does my sewer, when I get, you know, paid was like $10 or whatnot per month, and I've been paying for like 2 years. And I'm like, I'm paying for that for 2 years, but I don't have a sewer, sorry, not sewer, storm drain, excuse me, in front of the property, and how do I get one? And who pays for it? Does my property tax pay for it, or the city? And she says they give money to the city, and the city decides what to do with it. So how are you structuring your infrastructure for new development versus repairs for pre-existing developments if they don't have them and maybe need? So
Okay.
that my money's being used for a service that I'm not getting.
All right.
How do I get it?
That's not as simple as what I was looking for.
Yeah, sorry.
But that isn't quite, let's just see if Mike Michaels can,
Okay.
and sewer and stormwater are different.
Sorry.
Okay.
That, good point, we're talking two separate utilities here, and, you know, the nominal fee we do get for stormwater goes to the system as a whole for maintenance, repair, replacement, just like sewer rates go into the sewer utility for O&M, repair, replacement, capital improvements. It's an engineering study that's done on a periodic basis, typically about every 6 years as part of our overall comp plan updates, where we look at the needs of the system moving forward and plan for the upcoming 6 years and typically beyond as well, so.
The assessor doesn't collect money to pay for stormwater.
No.
It's paid for in a different pot.
Okay, any other comments? Yes, Ms. Cooper, you want to speak for a few minutes?
I'll try and make it like less than a minute. Forrest Cooper, 409 West Railroad, 807 South 14. I just want to make a comment here on this particular issue, more so about you guys. I love seeing that you guys have differing opinions, because that's what makes a strong commission. And I don't think a lot of the public realize that a lot of your interaction together on issues like this happens right here. And so I'm always into all of it because of the Washington RCWs. I think it's wonderful that you guys have your healthy debate. I've seen some encouraging things here today. One, Mike talking about warming up to a deal after getting out and talking to the people. That's awesome. You know, you can change your mind, you can change your position, and remaining flexible is important. The other one though, and I think it's actually really funny, Gary brought up a used car analogy because I wanted to bring up a used car analogy of my own. A couple weeks ago, I blew out a wheel seal on the axle of my van. I went and I bought a new wheel seal and new brakes and all this stuff to put it together. I put it together, I go out the next day, blow the thing again. I'm like, oh man, so I got to do the whole thing again. This time I bought a wheel bearing to go with it. Now, my options I had for doing a repair, I could either replace the whole rear end, put a whole new one in, I could buy a new car, or I could repair just the part that's bad, or I could repair both sides while I have it all opened up. This is the same type of situation that you guys are dealing with on a bigger scale with public money. You have to find out what repairs to do that are necessary and where to think about the future, and then also where to conserve and hold back. I hold with Gary on a lot of this one here. I understand your points you're making with this, and I think they're very valid. The idea of when the rate increases were put in place, I remember how that process went through. I've mentioned to you guys before, I look doubly at these because I have two. I got a business and a home. I remember seeing that process, and yeah, we were at a little bit different time. And I think where you're coming from is possibly talking about maybe suspending part of that rate increase if it comes to it. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but that's kind of what I was getting from that. I think your approach to thinking about our local economy and thinking about the people is a really valid point. But I also think about the future is valid too, and I thinking about when we're doing one thing that's going to affect another two, just like the rear end on a van.
You're like a counselor kind of guy, a psychologist kind of guy.
You guys
huh?
got it, but I think the
All
main
right.
thing is people don't
Well,
understand that
yeah.
this is when you guys, as a commission, get to discuss these situations.
It's the only
So
time
keep
we
at
don't
it.
talk outside this room. So, thank you. Now, we have any other public comment on this issue? If not,
I had trouble with my car this week. Can I go up?
we could go up to the, go up to the mic. You can go up and, did you buy a new car or just the old one?
Honey, my car has 225,000 miles on it. My
Wow.
kid's Toyota Camry. Black and shiny though.
Sure. All right, no, that ends, yeah, only one comment per, yeah, we can't, we're trying to
I
limit the
couldn't hear
inter.
what he said when he said something. I couldn't hear what he said, so how do I?
The assessor's office does not collect money.
But
And-
did he say pond? It goes towards ponds?
No,
I'm sorry, I
no.
didn't hear it.
Different lot.
Yeah, different
Pot.
pot.
Oh, okay.
Pot, like a silo. All right,
Sorry.
well, it looks like according to this, we've talked this one to death. And
I just want to say one more
Sure.
thing about this.
Sure.
Because I am extremely concerned about any reference or any talk at all about suspending the rate increases that we have already approved, because there are more difficulties that can happen as a result of that. Dave gave a list of them last week at our commission meeting, and the bottom line is we could say, oh yes, let's give ourselves a couple of good years, but then those increases are going to be greater and bigger and more difficult. And I think it's irresponsible to even think about not going forward with our scheduled rate increases. And that's it.
And I think it is irresponsible to continue to borrow money until we have some way to pay it back. So you're
We're
responsible.
not borrowing it.
Yeah. Well, we have the money. It's good to have a little money in the bank, never hurt. So we have beat this one to death.
What's your cutoff date on this?
Again, as I mentioned before, we really have two decisions. One, the award of the contract. That sooner than later, ideally today. We probably have a few weeks, couple weeks would be nice. It'd be nice to get the answer today on the sewer. We've got a little bit of processing with getting contract signs and that before the contractor really can get rolling, and then we'll need an answer on how much of this schedule he's going to be doing.
Mike, when we talked about this, excuse me.
Okay, go ahead, Jim.
When we talked about this, the real issue is not whether or not we proceed with the sewer work as envisioned in the contract. The real issue is whether we create a change order after the contract gets established in order to be able to adjust the amount of sewer work that we're doing. Because you got to do some of the sewer work. So there's really no downside in allowing the project to go forward. The real critical thing is how much sewer we're going to build, and that decision can be made later.
That's true.
Is that correct?
That's true. There is a time limit on the later because we need to be able to give the contractor direction on how much material to start ordering and things like that. Because remember, the utility work, sewer and water, is the stuff that's probably going to be happening here pretty soon this fall.
So what's the deadline on being able, on our need to define the sewer work that needs to be done? Because you could go everywhere from just, you could do none of it, but then that would be kind of crazy because you have a manhole being built into your existing, or a stormwater system being built into your existing sewer system, for instance.
Yeah.
So that, and also the state will pay all but the match portion of that portion of the sewer project. So what you're talking about is that different portion. And you could do none of that, you could do all that. You might even do some of it if that's, so there's lots of options, but what is the deadline on that option?
I would say ideally, based on what we're hearing from the contractor now and his interest in getting rolling, if we made that decision within about 2 weeks, we're not going to impact his schedule and his planning in an adverse way.
All right,
All right.
so,
One other thing, is I would approve, obviously, the B section, the 700 feet. So, I mean, I'm in favor of doing that one. Not the 3,700, but the 700. So in this, I'm okay with that.
okay.
Okay, so, but on this, how we would do, we want to approve the contract, we want to get this thing going. But I think we should put a hold on the sewer work. Or we can just vote and they'll do it. You know, if that's the way the vote goes.
The vote would be to approve it all. The decision point would come, and it would include all of it. The decision point could be scheduled, and then we would come back and we would say, okay, what are we going to instruct the contractor to do? And then you pull back out the portion of the sewer work, all of it, or none of it, or a portion of it, within the next 2 weeks. So next week or the week after that.
Yeah, ideally, we would like to give them direction on that at their pre-construction conference, which we're tentatively looking at for probably the first full week of September right now.
All right.
So is there a penalty for awarding a contract for the full amount and then pulling a portion
No.
of the work out?
No.
So they've got line items that define what that cost would be for this portion of the work, so that you could change that, you could do that change order and it wouldn't be any negotiation.
Yeah, in fact, Bob is currently just in case, he's working on writing up what the change order would look like if we were to reduce it. We have that language being prepared now, and so we'll be ready to go either direction once we get the contractor, to get the contracts back and we get the pre-construction meeting actually settled.
So that would enable us a little more time looking for funding to pay for that.
You know, a private citizen at any time could come up and offer to write a check for $200,000 or $300,000 and it'd be like a moot point. It's not an impossibility. The public is aware of the discussion and what we're doing right here. So if I voted yes today on approving this with all those sewer in it, then that means I'm supporting that sewer
It
section.
depends on how you look at it. I mean, that could be perceived that way, but if you're doing it with the understanding that we're going to get another bite at this, then it might not be.
Okay. Well, I would request that we'd have another motion at that time, because I may change my mind in 2 weeks, but I probably won't unless there's something happening. So I want a commitment that we will address this issue and that we will have an opportunity to vote on that separately. That if I go along with the review. You see what I'm saying? Because I want to make very clear that I'm not for, at this point, extending that sewer line.
Now, if the other two commissioners, if they're saying today that they want to do the whole project without doing.
Absolutely.
Then I would,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
you might not get another bite at it.
Well, why don't we just vote on it then? And if they both go yes, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah, then we won't be back.
Yeah, we won't be back.
Yeah.
I have no problem with voting on this. Okay?
Yeah, this is a really tough one. I've been all over this for a good 6 months. I've met with Mike a number of times and Dave, and I've been on the field myself looking at this. And it flip-flopped a couple of times, and I really feel that as a leader of the community, my job is to look for the future, and I really believe that we need to do this project. And I therefore would make a motion that we award the Lake Boulevard Pioneer Way construction contract in the amount of $4,089,606.23 to Tapany Incorporated. Authorize the mayor to sign the contract when returned by the contractor, and authorize the city administrator to make any budget modifications necessary.
I second that motion.
Okay, there is a motion and a second. Any further discussion? At this point, I cannot support this motion. And that's my discussion part. But we've had a first and a second. All those in favor signify by...
I just would like to say one other thing. I would like to reiterate what Mike said. This has been a very difficult decision. It was easy at the beginning because it made so much sense, and we thought we had the full funding and an easy pot of money to use. So it is difficult, but I am very much in favor of it.
Good. Okay, so we have all those in favor signify by saying...
But one other point I'd like to make it real clear that we aren't borrowing money to do this.
Nope.
That it's all money that we have through rates And we will not be borrowing money to make that real clear to the media, so that it gets out there with those quotes.
Except for the extra, what is it, 158,000.
No, we're not borrowing any money.
Yeah. Well, where's the 158,000 coming
It's
from?
all the rates.
In
It's
the
not
rate,
borrowed money.
in the rates, if we raise the rates.
It's already been passed and approved,
If,
so it's a
if
done
we
deal.
follow through on the rate structure that has already been approved.
Absolutely. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I
Opposed? Aye. There you go.